Every second your brain processes approximately 11 million bits of information, but you only notice a few of them. That's what makes the difference. In the ordinary mind and in a hyper-focused mind, in the shadow mind, we experience the same hidden mechanisms, where your reticular activating system, dopamine circuits, and subconscious filters together determine what you see, what you hear, and what you ignore it. This isn't motivation. This is mind reprogramming. Each chapter will train your brain to sharpen observation, focus on the weapon to change and dismantle distractions. So he's ready to upgrade his mind. Each episode is an experiment where you get inside your own mind and understand that hyperfocus and a sharp mind are not just qualities but trainable states of consciousness. The shadow of attention. When you fix your gaze on something, you're not just looking, you're choosing. Every blink, every micro movement, all this is being recorded inside your mind. Focus only on watching. There's no name. It's a decision-making process. A choice about which side you want to be, which reality will you acknowledge and which will you ignore. And this choice is your mental one. It is the foundation of sharpness and hyperfocus. The core of this ability in our brain is the center, the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of the brain that thinks, plans, and makes selective decisions. Attention regulates. When you consciously channel your attention, the brain is activated. But this requires more than simple neuroscience, because evolution has made it part of our survival toolkit. Think about it. Thousands of years ago, human eyes and minds in the wild began to distinguish between predators and prey. It served to differentiate. Anyone who is limited to seeing only objects, he never moved forward in life. His eyes simply didn't capture things. But also cell changes, motion, shadows, and it also decoded behavioral cues. This is the ancient form of selective observation. Root. In today's modern world, that same old mechanism has become distorted. Notifications, ads, social media, our eyes are glued to everything. But our minds are focused on one thing. It can't focus on the spot. That's why your RAS, reticular activating systems, that regulate selective attention and alertness. Modern life has become overstimulated and fragmented. You think you're looking, yes, but you're not actually observing. You've become a distracted observer, but it's possible to change that. Hyperfocus and observation aren't mystical skills. When you make deep observations on something, these signals are transmitted in a controlled manner. Triggers happen. This means your mind is aware and distractions fade. They happen. Now imagine if you could master this ability. Every sound, every shadow, you can notice the movement. You won't be just an observer. You'll be a solution to the situation. Anticipate the dynamics. This is the same dark psychology trick used by predators. Elite negotiators and tactical minds use observation as a silent weapon. Besides visual attention, your auditory and tactile senses are also important. Your mind processes every detail on an unconscious level, decodes frequencies, vibrations, and microsounds. Evolutionary, think of it in context as a predator's footsteps or wrestling leaves in the jungle. It meant life and death. In the modern context, offices, social interactions, city streets, this skill helps you detect unnoticed dynamics. You can read social cues. You can understand hidden intentions and become a superior observer in any environment. Yes, but meditation isn't limited to just noticing. It also includes interpretation, and it's important to tap into the power of internalization. Your mind processes every sensory input, assigns meaning. This is the moment when cognitive sharpness is born from observation. When you consciously observe micro details, your memory and decision-making circuits are also enhanced. Another layer is conscious choice versus subconscious processing. Your eyes consciously select something, but the subconscious mind analyzes that data, recognizes patterns and plans for the future, generates predictions. This is cognitive dominance. A person who is in this loop, he becomes the architect of reality, no longer a mere observer. It goes. Now think about modern distractions. Social media, emails, notifications are like artificial predators. They steal your attention. They do, through dopamine triggers. The hyper-focused observer resists it. He masters selective ignoring. That's dark discipline. attention treating it like a commodity and avoiding wasting your cognitive energy. To understand this more deeply, consider a practical scenario. In a crowded coffee shop, yes, people are talking, machines are making noise, and you have a laptop open in front of you. Normal. The observer would simply be caught up in the screen and the surrounding chaos. But a hyper-focused observer would be able to see every microscopic object, captures details. The slight twitch of a hand on the table, someone's micro-expression, subtle sound changes in the background. Data for subconscious pattern recognition. The brain integrates this data and anticipates future movements. It does. This skill isn't just knowledge or memory, it's psychological power. When you observe and you are in control, only those who observe can influence you. This is the core principle of dark psychology. Perception is power, closing cinematic reflection. When you train your attention, you don't just look at things. You learn, you sculpt your mind, you master selective awareness. Shadows, details, and cell patterns become your playground. Evolutionary instincts and modern neuroscience seem to work together. Your mind remains alert, sharp, and ready. Now the question is whether you want to become an observer. Do you want a hyper-focused master? Your eyes will decide. Neural maps of focus, neural maps of focus. When you delve deep into your mind, you're not looking at neurons and pathways. You're looking at the architecture of your reality. Every sensation, every detail, every fleeting thought, all captured in the neural network's intricate maps. The brain doesn't just process information. It transforms information into sculpt does. That's neural mapping. That invisible blueprint that defines hyperfocus and observation. Our prefrontal cortex and parietal together, the lobes, form attention networks. These networks are like invisible radar, filter and prioritize every sensory input. But understand this, it's not just modern science. It's an artifact of evolutionary survival. In the woods, hunter needed to detect every motion, notice every shadow. The slightest movement of the predator, rustling of leaves, or slight change in predator posture, it was instantly decoded through neural circuits. Neurons carried this data in their electrical impulses. Synapses, neurotransmitters, and dendrites' microscopic dances all enable your focus and observation. Dopamine bursts trigger alertness. Norepinephrine sharpens micro-pattern recognition. Cortisol spikes mild, maintains vigilance under stress. Evolution designed this system to ensured that attention was not limited to external reality, but also to future predictions, and these same neural maps are also integrated into survival calculations. Overstimulated and fragmented. Mobile notifications, emails, scrolling feeds are like artificial predictors. It's like your attention radar, they distract you. You think your mind is alert, but in reality the neural maps have become diffused. The hyper-focused observer is the one who consciously retrains neural pathways. He becomes master of his internal architecture. Understand the power of neural plasticity. The brain continuously adapts. It does this, just as a hunter adapts his strategy to the environment. Attention and observation skills are strengthened through deliberate practice. When you learn to notice details. Synaptic connections tighten. Every detail, the pattern becomes a permanent neural representation in each shadow brain. Cognitive dominance. Now think about how much the subconscious mind plays a role in these neural maps. Yes, you're consciously making only a few selections, but subconsciously you're following those patterns. It analyzes, categorizes, and anticipates. This is the hidden layer which enables hyper-awareness and split-second decision-making. In the modern context, this was a life and death skill for hunter PR. Social interactions, negotiation, strategic thinking, these same skills make you invisible. It empowers you. Hyper-awareness doesn't mean you consciously monitor everything. You are doing it. This means that your brain is processing every micro-pattern on a subconscious level. It's tracking you. You simply consciously decide which information to process. This is the essence of dark psychology. The core principle is that what is perceived is what is controlled. Neural maps, this is the blueprint for your inner dominion. Sensory integration is also critical. Eyes, ears, touch, all these inputs converge into neural maps. The brain weights them assigns. which signal is important, which is background noise. In an evolutionary perspective, this may play a role in predator detection, food location, and social was critical of Quez. In a modern perspective, it is a discussion of negotiation, social manipulation, and tactical thinking become power. Attention is another layer, temporal mapping. The brain encodes each event into a timeline. This microsecond accuracy helps you anticipate the dynamics of the environment. Predators' footsteps in evolution meant survival. In modern life, the importance of clear body language in client meetings or colleagues' hesitation can be interpreted as an opportunity or a threat. Neural maps span time and space. They integrate into and expand your awareness. Now consider a practical exercise. Sit in a room. Light be minimal and observe. Every shadow, every sound, every minute detail. Your brain mapping it all out. Learning to detect micro-patterns. Deliberate neural training weaponizes your mind. Hyper-focused observer, it is the one that tracks the internal and external architecture simultaneously. Synaptic reflection. Every neuron, every dendrite, every synapse, it's all yours. Shadow maps of the mind are forming. You are becoming an architect, not an observer. The dance of neural pathways takes you to hidden layers of reality. Dopamine and the symphony of norepinephrine amplifies your alertness and observation. Subconscious pattern recognition gives you the power to understand invisible dynamics. You master neural maps. You master your cognitive architecture. Every shadow, every sound, every micro-expression is your inner leaves a mark on the radar. Hyperfocus doesn't just mean attention. It means control, dominance, and inner story. Evolutionary instincts and modern when neuroscience aligns, you can access unseen layers of reality. Yes. Now the question is, do you want to be just an observer or a master of neural maps? Will decipher your mind, the chemistry of concentration, when you observe your mental machinery. You're not just seeing neurons and pathways, you're feeling a chemical symphony. You are an internal orchestra that controls your focus and observation. Orchestrates. Dopamine, norepinephrine, cortisol. These are just words, no. It's the invisible switches in your brain that control your perception, attention, and activate decision-making. Imagine if you were a hunter in a jungle. Every shadow, every subtle movement, every wriggling leaf could mean life and death. Your brain, it also calibrates internal chemistry. Dopamine is linked to alertness and reward. Triggers anticipation. Norepinephrine accelerates micro-pattern detection and cortisol maintains vigilance during mild stress. This is the same chemistry that rescued the prehistoric humans from the predator, helped capture prey. In today's modern world, those same chemical mechanisms have become distorted. Media instant gratification notifications, these artificial triggers dopamine spikes create. You think your focus is alert, but it's actually fragmented and externally manipulated. The hyperfocused observer is one who self-regulates internal chemistry. It works without artificially triggered dopamine. Instead, it creates a controlled chemical environment. Neurotransmitters, only these aren't chemical messengers. They're attention architects. Dopamine reward fuels anticipation. When you observe something carefully, neurotransmitter cells generate micro-rewards. Detect small patterns doing it, noticing the micro details. This reinforcement loop is what your neural network needs, trained circuits. Norepinephrine also plays a critical role. This chemical micro enhances pattern detection, sensory sharpening, and temporal attention. Hunters can instantly decode micro-movements of prey in an evolutionary context. In the modern context, body language, social cues, environmental, this skill enables interpreting signals. Cortisol is also misunderstood. It's not a chemical. It's not just a stress hormone. In controlled doses, it can increase alertness, and vigilance is maintained. A hyper-focused mind regulates it. No overload, just enough stress to stay sharp. This is the control arousal state you need. Keeps you free from distractions. But the mere presence of chemicals isn't enough. Your conscious engagement and deliberate practice tune these in. When you do deep observation exercises, notice micro details, detect patterns. By doing this, you understand that you are calibrating your neurotransmitter releases. brain chemistry and cognitive skills become synchronized. Imagine a scenario. You have a room in front of you, the lights are dim and objects are scattered. You consciously decide to observe every object, every shadow, every sound. Dopamine rewards everyone when you detect micro patterns. Norepinephrine heightens attention and maintains cortisol. Your internal alertness, the chemical orchestra, is working in a perfect symphony. There's also a dark psychology angle. That's it. The person who masters their brain chemistry is simply an observer. He doesn't. He becomes a mind architect. He can anticipate the situation. Self can detect manipulation and has absolute control over decision-making. Observation becomes power. Chemistry becomes a tool. The psychological effect of distractions also occurs through the chemical layer. Instant gratification addicts the brain with dopamine spikes. A hyper-focused mind consciously overrides this. Deliberate micro-observation and controlled attention exercises stabilize dopamine loops. The mind detects patterns. Neural architecture refines. And cognitive dominance increases. Sensory integration and chemical synergy are also critical. Visual, auditory, and tactile inputs converge, neurotransmitters assigning them weights. The dopamine reward system maintains alertness. Norepinephrine sharpens micropattern detection. Cortisol controls vigilance, enables predator detection, food gathering, and this skill enabled navigating social hierarchies. Attention control, social influence, negotiation, etc. These same skills are achieved. Reflection, think every thought, every micro detail, every sound, your internal chemistry echoing in the orchestra. Neurons, neurotransmitters, and the brain circuits, all this is the invisible machinery of your hyperfocused mind. You're the conductor, not the observer. Dopamine, norepinephrine, and cortisol control your attention, and sculpting observation. Detecting every micro pattern in your reinforces internal chemical systems. Closing synesthetic thought. When you understand chemistry and consciously control it, your mind he loses his alertness. He becomes hyper-aware, ultra-sharp, and cognitively dominant. Evolutionary instincts and modern neuroscience combine to control your attention, and you turn observation into the ultimate weapon. Now the question is, do you want to leave brain chemistry to random chaos? Or take it under your control? Want to become a master of concentration? Your mind will answer your next move. Selective attention is the art of ignoring. When selective attention, art of ignoring, when you go into the deepest layers of your mind, you understand that attention, it's not just about noticing. It's also about the art of ignoring. Every sensory input, every sound, the shadow appears on your neural radar. But the hyper-focused observer knows that who to process and who to dismiss. This skill is what builds your mental sharpness, and it is the foundation of cognitive dominance. From a scientific perspective, it is the key. This is primarily the work of the prefrontal cortex and parietal attention networks. Filter out irrelevant stimuli and allocate resources to relevant inputs. When you consciously decide which signal to send to your awareness, your brain conserves energy and your focus is amplified. Mechanisms that evolution developed in hunter-gatherer dynamics. Think prey, every wrestling leap, every shadow, every micro-movement for the hunter in the historic jungle. Detection was critical, but processing all signals simultaneously was. This was impossible. So selective attention evolved. The brain learned to recognize irrelevant signals, learned to ignore so that survival-critical information can be quickly and efficiently processed. It was important to notice the predator's slightest movement. But the background wind, ignoring leaves or distant animal sounds. This neural efficiency is hyper-focused. This is the observer's signature ability. This mechanism has been distorted in the modern world. Social media notifications, email alerts, advertisements, these are artificial. They attack your attention radar like predators. Every blink, every scroll, each ping artificially stimulates your dopamine circuits, and your focus becomes diffused. A hyper-focused observer is one who learns to consciously ignore artificial noise, masters selective filtering. The second layer of selective attention is cognitive filtering. Sensory inputs only ignoring it isn't enough. Thoughts, emotions, and internal distractions also demand attention. They hijack the subconscious mind, past memories, internal dialogue, all of that. These internal distractions can become irrelevant. It recognizes and selectively dismisses. This is the core of dark psychology. The principle is that what is perceived influences, what is ignored influences. He becomes powerless. Now consider the practical perspective. A crowded office, the environment you're in. Colleagues' conversations, printer noise, phone notifications can all disrupt your focus, can be hijacked. The hyper-focused observer consciously decides that these inputs not processing. The mind sets boundaries internally. Attention resources allocates and detects only critical signals. This is called selective ignoring, makes you a superior observer and decision maker. Sensory integration and neural efficiency is also a focus of this chapter. Eyes, ears, touch, all these inputs converge, but the brain assigns weight to them. Dopamine is certainly rewarding when you ignore irrelevant things and notice the critical details. Norepinephrine suppresses attention and cortisol maintains controlled vigilance. Evolutionary predator detection, threat assessment and resource gathering in perspective, this same enabling skills, negotiation, strategy, social awareness in a modern perspective or skill achieves. Dark psychology insight is also important. The person who masters the art of selective attention and ignoring is not merely an observer. He acquires invisible influence and control. Micro-behaviors and environmental dynamics are all within his awareness, and he is adept at manipulating the situation. Becomes superior. Observation becomes a weapon. Ignoring becomes armor. Kinetic think visualization. Sit in a dimly lit room. Notice movements and sounds around you. The normal mind gets stuck in the case. The hyper-focused mind selectively filters it does. Every irrelevant detail fades, but critical micro-patterns are illuminated. The brain is mapping itself internally. Neural pathways are reinforced, neurotransmitters are being precisely calibrated. Dopamine, norepinephrine, cortisol, all three working in perfect symphony. Reflection. The hyper-focused observer knows that power is in perception and control in ignoring. Whatever you do not notice does not disturb your mind. Whatever you consciously observe, it is what appears on your internal radar. Evolutionary instincts, modern neuroscience, and dark psychology, when aligned, you become a master of selective attention and ignoring. Now the question is, can you control your mind? Will you abandon venerable to every distraction, or the art of selective ignoring? Will you become a hyper-focused master by acquiring it? Your next move will determine that. Hyper-awareness. Mind as a radar, the hyper-aware mind is a reader. When you descend into the deepest layers of your mind, if so, you realize that attention is not limited to just seeing or hearing. It's like an invisible radar that scans the environment. Vibration, every micro-expression, every fleeting detail. Hyper-aware observer, he doesn't just see surface reality. He sees the shadow layers and hidden patterns of reality. It also decodes the text. From a scientific perspective, it mainly reticular activating system of the cingulate gyrus, prefrontal cortex, and parietal lobes. This brain region filters, prioritizes, and processes continuous sensory input. Interpretations. Critical activating system alertness and selective regulates attention. Prefrontal cortex conscious decision-making, planning, and focus control. Pedal lobe special awareness motion is critical for detection and sensory integration. When these systems are aligned, your mind scans the environment like a radar. In context, this hyper-awareness was a life and death skill, hunter or prey in the jungle. It was critical for both to detect every slight change in their surroundings, a predator's slight movement, a micro-gesture of prey. A sound in the air, vibrations are decoded instantaneously through neural pathways. The mind analyzes these patterns and generates future predictions. Ability determines survival and dominance. In the modern context, hyper-awareness equally critical is the importance of social and professional dynamics. Expressions, body language, environmental cues. All of these signals are part of our social interactions. They empower interaction, negotiation, influence, and decision-making. An aware observer doesn't just capture information. He or she sees hidden dynamics, anticipate, and utilize. This is the same dark psychology skill that elites use. Negotiators, strategists, and tactical miners use this neurochemical layer as well. Dopamine is critical. Reward anticipation, norepinephrine micropattern detection, and cortisol control. Vigilance. All these neurotransmitters optimize your mind radar. When you practice conscious observation, these chemical signals are precisely calibrated. The brain internally integrates. Neural pathways are reinforced and subconscious micro-pattern recognition is enhanced. Hyper-awareness is limited to sensory input. No, it is cognitive anticipation, pattern recognition, and predictive modeling. The subconscious mind continuously receives signals from the environment, tracks and predicts future possibilities. Predator footsteps meant survival in an evolutionary context. Context may include a colleague's hesitation, the client's self-tone, or social group. Dynamics predicts and interprets everything. Think about practical exercises. In a crowded room, the light is minimal. Every slight shadow, every tiny movement, every whisper sounds, and all this register on the neural radar. A hyper-aware mind consciously selects which signals to process and which to ignore. Mind pattern detection activates. Dopamine release generates rewards. When you detect micro details, noradrenaline helps with attention. Cortisol maintains alertness. The brain is internally mapping neural pathways. Reinforcements are coming. The dark psychology inside is also critical. Hyper-aware, the observer ceases to be merely an observer. He or she acquires invisible influence and control. The micro-behaviors and environmental cues that are detected are social leverage converts into tactical advantage. Observation becomes power. Awareness becomes a weapon. Deliberate practices to develop hyper-awareness, environmental scanning, micro-expression detection, auditory focus exercises. All of these techniques optimize neural architecture. The subconscious mind continuously detects micro-patterns. Internal radar refines and increases cognitive dominance. Cinematic reflection, think you stand in a shadow-field environment. Dim lights, slight movements, whispering sounds. Every microscopic detail is registered on your internal radar. Dopamine, norepinephrine, and cortisol's symphony amplifies internal alertness and observation. Neural pathways are strengthening. You are not an observer. You are a witness to the hidden layers of the environment. You are becoming a master. Closing thought. When you master hyper-awareness, you don't just process sensory input. You anticipate predictive patterns. You can decode and manipulate social and environmental dynamics. Evolutionary instincts and the perfect alignment of neuroscience turns your mind radar into the ultimate weapon. Now the question is, will you? Will you let your mind drift into random observation? Or will you create a hyper-aware radar to monitor reality? Will you master the hidden layers of the universe? Your mind will answer the next step. Mindful metacognition, mindful metacognition. When you delve into the deepest layers of your mind, you are not limited to thoughts and observations. You are thinking about thinking. This means you enter the world of mindful metacognition. This is the layer where you can observe, regulate, and optimize your cognitive processes. The hyper-focused observer sees only external. He doesn't just look at reality. He also decodes internal reality. Scientific from a perspective, mindful metacognition primarily involves the prefrontal cortex, interactions of the anterior cingulate cortex, ACC, and default mode network, DMA. Prefrontal cortex conscious planning, focus, and attention is critical to regulation. ACC error detection, conflict monitoring, and helps with cognitive control. DMA helps with self-reflective processes and is responsible for introspection. When these networks function harmoniously, then you consciously monitor your thought patterns, biases, and attention loops. In an evolutionary context, this skill is crucial for social navigation and survival. In the wild, a hunter not only knew how to detect prey, but also how to protect his monitoring internal decisions. past experiences, and instinctive reactions, a slight misjudgment could make the difference between life and death. Metacognition is a sophisticated layer of evolutionary adaptation that understands internal reality, synchronizes the mind with external reality. In the modern world, this skill is crucial for social equally skilled in interactions, strategic thinking, negotiation, and self-discipline. This is important. The subconscious mind is constantly detecting patterns, but the conscious mind interprets and regulates them. Hyperfocused observer knows how to recognize internal thoughts, emotional reactions, and habitual attention loops. Monitoring isn't just about awareness. It's about power and control. There's also a chemical layer, is critical. Dopamine release generates reward loops when you focus on your internal thoughts and analyze cognitive patterns. Norepinephrine increases attention and alertness. Cortisol maintains mild stress to maintain internal vigilance. Practicing mindful metacognition aligns neurotransmitters and neural circuits, leading to internal observation and focus synergize. Think from a practical perspective. It's a challenging problem. A normal mind will only process external stimuli and will react impulsively. A hyperfocused mind activates internal observation. Thoughts, emotions, and biases are subconscious monitors. Subconscious mind patterns recognition. Dopamine release generates rewards when correct insights are detected. Norepinephrine heightens attention. Cortisol alertness sustains. Dark psychology insight is crucial here too. The person who is mindful, the master of metacognition, ceases to be a mere observer. He becomes the architect of thought and decision-making, become control over the internal cognitive landscape. Acquired internal patterns, habitual reactions, and attention loops are all part of his dominance sets in. Observation becomes power. Metacognition becomes a weapon. The integration of awareness and metacognition is critical. External patterns and synchronizing internal thoughts makes the mind ultra-sharp and cognitively dominant. The perfect alignment of evolutionary instincts and modern neuroscience helps you understand the hidden depths of both environment and self. Decode the layers. Kinetic visualization, dimly lit room, soft ambient sound, subtle visual cues. You sit, eyes closed, on an internal landscape. Focused thoughts and emotions are registered. Micro patterns are identified. Dopamine generates self-reward. Norepinephrine heightens alertness. Cortisol maintains vigilance. Neural circuits are internally reinforced. You are not an observer. You become an internal strategist and cognitive architect. Closing reflection, mindful metacognition of the hyperfocused observer. This skill is called external observation, selective attention, and internal command center, and transforms pattern recognition into ultimate power. Evolutionary, when instincts and modern neuroscience align, you achieve internal and you become a master of both your external realities. Now the question is, will you leave your thoughts and cognitive processes passive, or will you practice mindful metacognition? Art of acquiring a hyper-focused mind. Architect your minds. Next move, training the lens. When you train your mind, training the lens, if you dig deeper, it becomes clear that hyperfocus and observation are only natural. It's not a talent. It's a skill developed through deliberate practice and sensory training. Each observer perceives his or her reality only passively. Yes, but a hyperfocused mind trains its perceptions deliberately. Training the lens is the essence. Sharpen your sensory and cognitive instruments. From a scientific perspective, it primarily involves the visual cortex. The auditory cortex is an interplay of the somatosensory cortex and the prefrontal cortex. The visual cortex is micro, detects details. Auditory cortical frequencies and rhythms identify. The somatosensory cortex creates an internal map of touch and vibration. By integrating all these sensory inputs, the frontal cortex regulates conscious attention and selective observation. When these systems harmonically interact, then you literally focus, and you can sharpen it. For hunter or predator in an evolutionary context, this skill was life-saving. Slightest movement, slight sound, and paint in the jungle vibrations meant survival or death. They accurately measured the mind environment. They could map themselves, They escaped predators. They were captured and placed in the social hierarchy. Neural circuits and sensory systems are responsible for this layered observation. In the modern context, these same skills are used in social, professional, and cognitive domains, provides superior advantage. Sensitivity to micro-expressions, environmental cues, auditory patterns are all signals a hyperfocused mind detects. Training the lens, this means that you can optimize your perception through deliberate exercises. Attention control, selective ignoring, micro-pattern detection, and SAP practice. The neurochemical layer is also critical. Dopamine is the key to reward, generates loops as you detect microscopic details. Norepinephrine attention hides. Cortisol controls and sustains vigilance. Deliberate sensory exercises to precisely calibrate these neurotransmitters. This continuously improves observation skills and focus. Exercises form the core of this chapter. For example, objects in low-light environments tracking, micro-pattern detection in crowded spaces, auditory drill subneural pathways reinforce. The brain integrates internally. Sensory, the cortex is refined, and subconscious pattern recognition is enhanced. Exercise sharpens your mind's radar. Dark psychology insights here too. This is important. The person who trains to master the lens is only an observer. He becomes the architect and manipulator of the hidden reality. Cues, environmental dynamics, and sensory micro-patterns all come into his awareness. Observation becomes weapon, hyper-aware lens becomes armor. Cinematic think visualization. You're standing in a dimly lit room. Objects are scattered, swirls. Shadows and movements are what the eyes focus on. The dopamine reward is subtly triggered when micro-details are noticed. Norepinephrine heightens alertness. Cortisol maintains vigilance. Auditory corpuscles detect faint sounds. The somatosensory cortex registers micro-vibrations. Neural circuits internally, you are not an observer. You become a master of the hidden layers of the environment. Closing reflection training the lens means deliberate consciousness and continuous sensory optimization. This is the foundation of hyperfocus and observation. Evolutionary instincts and modern neuroscience combine to create, can decode the shadow layers of reality, can anticipate environmental patterns, and can establish invisible dominance in social dynamics. Now the question is whether you will leave your perception passive or the art of training the lens. Acquire and become a hyper-focused observer and reality architect. Your mind. The next step will answer. The Dadac discipline. When you the dark discipline, if you dig deeper, it becomes clear that hyperfocus and observation are merely skills. No, it's a manifestation of discipline, an internal code that keeps you frees one from distractions, impulses, and chaos. Meaning of dark discipline control isn't just external, it's internal. It's based on your own mental machinery. Absolute command. Understand this from a scientific perspective. Prefrontal cortex. Anterior, the cingulate cortex, ACC, and basal ganglia are the main players. Executive function regulates planning, decision-making, focus control. The ACC performs error detection and cognitive conflict monitoring. Basal ganglia govern habitual behaviors and automated routines. When you are aligned, you can consciously utilize the power of mental discipline. In an evolutionary context, this skill could have made the difference between life and death. Hunter or prey was supposed to detect not just external threats but internal ones. Impulses and distractions also had to be controlled. Hunger, fear, curiosity, aggression influenced internal state survival decisions. Dark discipline is an evolutionary adaptation that underlies internal regulation and controlled attention. It integrates social influence, strategic thinking, productivity, and personality is crucial. Social media, notifications, instant gratification. External chaos creates emotional impulses, past memories, habitual thoughts, or internal noise. A hyper-focused mind is the same as these external and internal regulates distractions. Selective attention, deliberate ignoring, and internal self-control. This is the essence of dark discipline. The chemical layer is also critical. Dopamine controls reward anticipation. Norepinephrine controls alertness and sensory stimulation, enhances precision. Cortisol controls and sustains vigilance. Mindful internal routines and deliberate exercise can improve neurotransmitters and neural networks, optimize pathways. Hyperfocused observer internal chemistry can weaponize. Practical perspective: start your day thinking. Every thought, emotion, and environmental input, consciously monitored internal impulses, fear, anxiety, distraction, selectively dismiss external distraction, notifications, conversations. Random stimuli carefully filtered generate dopamine. Rewards norepinephrine, helps in maintaining attention, while correct focus is maintained. Cortisol controlled vigilance, sustains brain internally mapping. Neural circuits are being reinforced. Dark psychology insights individuals who are dark. The master of discipline does. He is no longer a mere observer. He is the architect of the mind itself. Becomes internal routines, attention loops, decision-making patterns, all are under his command. Observation becomes weapon, discipline becomes armor. Internal regulation converts to external dominance. Synthetic visualization, dimly lit room, minimal distractions. Sit in a chair. Breathing controlled mind alert. Micro details, internal impasses, environmental curse, all internally monitored. Dopamine, norepinephrine, cortisol, all neurotransmitters, synchronized neural circuits, internally reinforced. Subconscious mind pattern recognition. You are no longer an observer. You are an internal strategist and cognitive architect. Closing reflection. Dark discipline means internalist selective attention and conscious control. This skill is the ultimate in hyperfocus and observation. The foundation of evolutionary instincts and modern neuroscience. Alignment makes you superior in both external and internal reality. Now the question is whether you want to remain a passive observer or acquire the dark discipline. Will you become the ultimate master of your mind? Your mind will answer the next step. Evolution in the modern jungle. Evolution in the modern jungle. When you descend into the deepest layers of your mind, it becomes clear that evolution was not limited to physical survival. It's also a story of selective survival, of attention and awareness. Survival, prey detection, and dominance in the environment are all skills acquired only through were based on external observation and internal focus. Digital feeds in the modern jungle, social media notifications, constant multitasking, all this is artificial. Similar to predators, survival skills now apply to mental train. Let's understand this from a scientific perspective. The reticular activating system, RAS, the prefrontal cortex and parietal lobes are central to this process. The RAS is selective, regulates attention. Prefrontal cortex, cognitive control and decision-making, manages memory, and the parietal lobe, special awareness and sensory integration. In an evolutionary context, these systems may reflect predators, prey, and environmental dynamics. We're fine-tuned to detect them instantly. In the modern context, this selective filtering translates into focus maintenance and distortion resistance. Survival in the jungle meant keeping your senses sharp, attuned to subtle patterns. Detecting and ignoring distractions. The slightest movement of the predator or rustle, signal of life and death. The nature of distractions in modern life, it's changed. Notifications, ads, scrolling feeds, these are digital predators. You think you're alert, but it's actually fragmented attention and dopamine. You're falling victim to overstimulation. A hyper-focused observer is one who escapes from artificial predators, reclaiming attention as power. This chapter, attention is not just a perception. It is a mental currency. The person who consciously controls attention, including in the social, cognitive, and emotional domains, dominance can be acquired. Selective observation, micro-pattern detection, and deliberate ignoring these skills are the foundation of survival and influence in the modern jungle. The neurochemical layer is also important. Dopamine is certainly rewarding when you ignore distractions and notice critical patterns. Norepinephrine, attention, helps. Cortisol controls and sustains vigilance. Deliberate attention management optimizes neural pathways, and the subconscious mind pattern recognition enhances. Think of practical examples. You have it's morning, Ignore social media notifications and emails. Environmental stimuli minimized. The brain is mapping internally. Attention is calibrated. Micro details detected. Dopamine is responsible for generating rewards. Norepinephrine is responsible for maintaining alertness. Cortisol is sustaining vigilance. You're not a passive consumer. You're an active one. You've become an observer and mind architect. This is precisely why a technology detox is needed. Neural circuits are altered by continuous exposure to artificial stimuli. Overstimulated, the brain suffers from fragmented attention. A hyper-focused mind makes conscious decisions. Digital diet, notification control, focused work periods to restore internal radar and cognitive maps. This detox process, in alignment with evolutionary instincts, makes you a dominant observer in the modern jungle. Kinetic reflection, dim light room, minimal stimuli, internal focus, height and endurance, detecting environmental micro-patterns. Dopamine, norepinephrine, cortisol, chemical symphony, aligns subconscious mind patterns, decoding it is. Neural circuits are being internally reinforced. You are not the observer, you are the mind. You're making a weapon. Judging by the length of the closing reflection evolution, attention is the ultimate survival tool. Digital distractions in the modern jungle, information overload, emotional noise, these are all artificial predators. People who lose their attention reclaims, becoming the hyper-focused observer and survivor of the modern jungle. The alignment of evolutionary instincts and modern neuroscience can help you become mentally healthy. Dominance. Now the question is, are you ready for the artificial predators of the modern jungle? Will you become a prey, or will you turn your attention into power and become the ultimate master of your mind? The next move will determine that. The infinite loop of awareness. When the infinite loop of awareness, if you delve deep into the mind, it becomes clear that awareness is just a linear process. It's not a process. It's an infinite loop, a perpetual cycle where observation, knowledge, and focus interact to form internal dominion. It constantly evolves within the loop. The mind is not just a tool. It is a weapon, and the century becomes both. This loop between external chaos and internal turbulence leads you to the ultimate story. Understand it from a scientific perspective. Prefrontal cortex, parietal lobes, reticular activating system, areas and default mode, the network, DMA, and so on create an internal loop. Regulates conscious planning and decision-making. Parietal lobes, special, maintains awareness and sensory integration. Arrays selective attention and controls alertness. The DMN facilitates internal reflection and self-awareness. The mind maintains internal loops when these systems are synchronized. Every observation, every pattern recognition, and every learning inside is continuously refined. In an evolutionary context, this was an infinite loop survival mechanism, and predators didn't just detect external stimuli. They also used their internal cognitive patterns, and instinctive reactions were also monitored. Detection and response generation were simultaneous processes. Internally, it operated in a continuous feedback loop. Every micro-decision, every reaction, every single observation was internally mapped. This internal loop was the key to survival and dominance. The secret was this loop. Cognitive dominance and personal growth in a modern context applies to observational awareness, knowledge, ill understanding, focus, and actionable application. When these three elements interact continuously, this creates internal dominance. The hyper-focused observer sees only external reality. It doesn't read. It decodes, maps, and manipulates internal reality, becomes a weapon that can anticipate a situation, formulate a strategy, and invisible influence can wield. Mind becomes sanctuary, where internal chaos is reduced, distractions are neutralized and controlled, focus is maintained. The neurochemical layer is critical. Dopamine reward anticipation subtly regulates. Knowledge gain, pattern detection, focus maintained, no relapse, amplifies attention. Cortisol controls and sustains vigilance. When the internal loop is activated, neurotransmitters dynamically adjust, neural pathways are reinforced, and the subconscious mind continuously detects and analyzes patterns. This biochemical orchestration makes your mind both a weapon and a sanctuary. Think practical exercises, dimly lit environment, minimal external stimuli. You sit down, the breathing-controlled internal loop is activated. Past emits micro-patterns, observational data, emotional states, cognitive strategies, and are being mapped simultaneously. Dopamine is generating SAL rewards when micro-details are noticed. Norepinephrine heightens alertness, cortisol maintaining vigilance, continuously detecting and observing subconscious mind patterns, predicting. Neural circuits are being internally reinforced. Turk psychology inside is also crucial. Infinite loop awareness hyper-focused, it gives the observer dominance over both internal and external reality. Not alone, not knowledge alone, not focus alone. These three interact continuously. Enables internal command, strategic anticipation, and invisible influence. Mind becomes a weapon able to detect, analyze, and act before external cases can even manifest. Mind becomes a sanctuary, internal matter, neutralized, attention-focused, cognitive clarity achieved, kinesthetic visualization. You in a shadow field room standing. Self-movements, whispers, ambient microcusses. Dim light highlights micro-patterns. Dopamine, norepinephrine, cortisol mapping neural circuits orchestrating chemical symphonies internally sensory, cognitive, and emotional layers. Subconscious mind, continuously micro-detecting patterns, converting every observation into internal knowledge. Each focus reinforces internal dominion. You are a passive observer. No, you're becoming a hyper-aware strategic mind architect. Modern reflection on personal growth is also included in this loop. Social media distractions are constant. External input, this is the modern jungle. Attention, fragmented dopamine, overstimulated, hyper-focused observer consciously activates the internal loop. Knowledge, observation, and focus continuously interact. The subconscious mind refines pattern recognition. Neural architecture strengthens. The mind internally becomes both weapon and sanctuary. Modern growth means achieving internal dominance, not just external skills. Closing reflection, the infinite loop of awareness, your mind's ultimate, its power. Both evolutionary instincts and modern neuroscience support it. We do. Observation, knowledge, and focus are the three elements. Continuous interaction creates internal dominance. The mind becomes a weapon. To anticipate, formulate strategies, and field influence. Creates mind peace. Neutralizes distractions. Maintains internal clarity. The amplified, hyper-focused observer consciously activates this loop and reality decodes the shadow layers of. Now the question is, will you remain a mere passive consumer, or will you become the ultimate master of your mind by acquiring the infinite loop of awareness? Your mind will respond to the next move. Sensory overload and control. Sensory overload then control. When you delve deep into your mind, it becomes clear, it is understood that human senses are not just passive receivers. They are powerful instruments that detect every micro detail, every vibration, and every sound pattern, but those same senses can sometimes become overloaded. Hyper-focused, the observer understands that attention and focus are not just mental skills. They are sensory management and control. Ignoring, regulating, and managing sensory overload, selectively engaging this skill, is the core of internal dominance and cognitive. Let's look at it from a scientific perspective. Visual cortex, auditory cortex, somato, the sensory cortex, and thalamus are brain regions that process and interpret sensory input. Prioritize. The thalamus is the sensory gateway. It decides which the input will reach conscious awareness. The visual cortex will process patterns, contrast, and detects movements. The auditory cortex decodes faint sounds and tonal variations. The somatosensory cortex registers tactile feedback and microvibrations. When these systems are overstimulated, attention fragmentation occurs and cognitive performance degrades. A hyper-focused mind consciously regulates these systems. Overload avoidance and amplifies essential signals. In evolutionary context, understanding sensory overload was life-saving. Micro for hunter or PR in the wild pattern detection and predator detection were critical. Every wrestle leave, shadow, and sound was a potential threat or opportunity. Overstimulated senses were dangerous. Excess input could confuse the brain and slow down decision-making. Evolution developed selective filtering and sensory prioritization. Dopamine reward anticipation is specifically calibrated. Norepinephrine sharpens attention, and cortisol maintains mild stress so that vigilance remains optimal. Think of a practical example. You're a hunter in the jungle. The slightest movement of a predator have to detect. Surrounding sounds, wind, distant animals, leaves, these are distractions. A hyper-focused mind activates selective filtering. Dopamine releases reward triggered when predator micromovement is detected, heightens alertness. Cortisol sustains vigilance. Neural pathways: you are not an observer, you are both predator and prey. Become a master at decoding micro-patterns. Sensory: in a modern context, the nature of overload has changed. Screens, notifications, ambient noise, multitasking. Like digital predators, they exert constant pressure on the brain. It causes artificial spikes. Attention is fragmented. Cortisol causes irregular vigilance. Sensory fatigue: focus loss, cognitive fragmentation. Hyper-focused observer consciously regulates screen detox, ambient noise controls sensory. Diet: this modern sensory hazen is. Dark psychology inside is also critical. The person who has sensory control, the master does. He simply doesn't detect external reality. He uses micro-patterns, can anticipate and manipulate. Observation becomes weapon, controlled sensory input becomes armor. A hyper-aware mind avoids overstimulation. Internal: the radar remains sharp and can be wielded with invisible influence. Neurochemical orchestration is also the focus of this chapter. Dopamine subtly rewards when irrelevant sensory input is ignored. No reappearance. Attention amplifies. Cortisol controls and sustains vigilance. The mind's internal loop activates observation, pattern recognition, selective attention continuously reinforced. Neural pathways are optimized. Subconscious: the mind constantly detects subtle patterns. Practical exercises: dimly lit room, minutal noise. You sit. Eyes closed, internal awareness, heightened external sounds, distant traffic noise. We are subconsciously registering ambient vibrations. Dopamine is a reward generates. Norepinephrine heightens attention. Cortisol maintains vigilance. The subconscious mind continuously detects micro-patterns. Circuits are internally reinforced. Sensory overload is avoided. Attention amplifies. Internal dominion is achieved. Synesthetic visualization: you're standing in a shadow-filled room. Dim lights are highlighting subtle patterns. Sounds: faint vibrations, ambient cuss, internally monitored. Dopamine, norepinephrine, cortisol, chemical symphony, aligned neural pathways internally. Reinforced subconscious mind detecting sensory micro-patterns. Attention and observation are hyper-focused. You are not a passive observer. You are sensory, becoming a controlled strategist and cognitive architect. Reflection: sensory overload isn't just an external phenomenon. It's also internal chaos. Both evolutionary instincts and modern neuroscience suggest this controlled sensory input and selective engagement provide ultimate cognitive predator protection. Food gathering, social micro-patterns, environmental awareness is made possible by optimized sensory control. The hyper-focused observer doesn't just see external reality. He or she experiences sensory overload. By becoming a master, one acquires both internal dominion and external influence. It's whether you'll be a victim of the sensory chaos of the modern world or sensory control, and by acquiring overload management, you will become the ultimate master of your mind. Your mind, the next move, will respond. Dopamine and the attention trap. When you dopamine and the attention trap, if you go deep into the mind, you will understand that attention and focus are only on the will. It's not about power or conscious control. Dopamine, this chemical messenger, traps the mind in infinite loops of reward and pleasure. Hyperfocus: the observer knows that dopamine is the mind's double-edged sword. It alerts you, It can make you motivated and hyper-aware, or it can make you passive in the same dopamine loop. It can leave the consumer distracted and fragmented. This is the attention trap. Let's look at it from a scientific perspective. Dopamine is primarily produced in the ventral tegmental cortex. Area VTA operates in the nucleus accumbens and prefrontal cortex. The VTA generates reward signals. The nucleus accumbens is involved in motivation and pleasure, the circuits that manage attention. The prefrontal cortex controls focus and executive decisions. Dopamine regulates brain function in an evolutionary context. Rewards were given to reinforce the action. Prey detected. Successful hunt. Dopamine surge brain internally mapped patterns reward anticipation refined dopamine is an evolutionary layer critical for hunters and gatherers in the wild. Precisely calibrated, correct focus and successful observation rewarded. Detecting setting traps securing resources, these behaviors are internal dopamine, was intrinsically tied to the reinforcement in dopamine loops. From observation and survival pleasure. Misalignment rarely occurred because distractions were minimal. Hyper-focused observer. Evolutionary mind exploited. Dopamine-driven motivation used to be optimized. In the modern context, the dopamine loop has become distorted. Social media notifications, endless scrolling, instant gratification apps, they operate like digital predators. Every click, every swipe, like dopamine, generates a spike. Attention is fragmented. Focus is diffused. Internal, the reward circuitry gets high. The hyper-focused observer is what drives dopamine, recognizes dependency, and consciously regulates it. Observation, intentional attention becomes selective. Internal radar sharpens. Practical examples. You're in a crowded cafe. Normal minds are distracted by external chatter, phone notifications, and lost in a digital cage. Hyper-focused mind consciously monitors dopamine loops. Every reward spike, social media alert, coffee aroma, environmental cue, internally registered, evaluated, selectively engaged dopamine self-reward generation, but attention and focus are consciously maintained. Neural pathways are internally reinforced. The subconscious mind continuously activates pattern recognition. Chemical orchestration is also critical. Dopamine subtly modulates reward anticipation. Norepinephrine attention amplifies. Cortisol-controlled vigilance sustains. Hyperfocused, the observer calibrates the neurotransmitters with conscious practice. Reward circuits are intentionally triggered and modulated. Internal loop, dopamine-driven, avoids distraction and reward dependency. It remains amplified. Internal dominance strengthens. Dark psychology insight is also essential. The person who masters the dopamine attention trap, he doesn't just read external reality. He also reads reward loops and behavioral influence. But control is acquired. Observation becomes a weapon. Dopamine becomes mastery armor. People who exploit the attention trap are more likely to be distracted by external inputs and social cues. Can dominance field? Kinetic visualization, dimly lit room sound, ambient sounds, occasional digital pink dopamine spikes, internally registered norepinephrine amplifies alertness. Cortisol maintains vigilance. Neural circuits decoding micro patterns. The subconscious mind is continuously evaluating reward loops, attention capture, distraction, potential. You observer know. You're becoming an internal reward architect and hyperfocus strategist. Closing reflection, dopamine isn't just a pleasure chemical. It's also an attention architect, and traps are also a source of motivation and reward in evolutionary hunting and survival. Used to amplify. Modern jungle screens, notifications, instant gratification, the trap has been set in. The hyper-focused observer consciously controls the dopamine loops, avoids reward dependency, and reclaims attention's power. Knowledge, observational focus, subdopamines interact continuously in the aware loop. Internal dominance is reinforced. Now the question is, are you dopamine-driven? Become a prey to distractions or acquire attention trap theory and dopamine regulation. By doing this, you will become the ultimate master of your mind. Your mind will respond to the next move. Micro movements. Macro power, micro movements, micro power. When you go deep into your mind, it becomes clear it turns out that human interaction isn't just about words. Micro-expressions, body language, and the subconscious, but all these signals are continuously communicated in the subconscious mind. The hyper-focused observer understands that every little movement, every subtle gesture, and every fleeting facial expressions reveal external reality and internal intention. These micro-movements are the source of ultimate micro-power. Scientists, from a cognitive perspective, this skill is primarily involved in the amygdala, prefrontal cortex. The fusiform gyrus and mirror neurons are involved. The amygdala is involved in emotional processing and responsible for threat detection. The prefrontal cortex regulates conscious interpretation and decision-making. The fusiform gyrus detects fuss and sal expressions. Neurons facilitate social mimicry and empathy. When these systems are synchronized, if there are, the observer can detect, decode, and interpret every micro can create predictive maps. In an evolutionary context, this skill is crucial for survival and was critical for social dominance. Dominance in the early social hierarchy in the wild, signals like postures, eye contact, micro-gestures are all part of communication. Hunters, gatherers, tribal members, everyone subconsciously listens to these signals. Correct detection and appropriate response are often life and death situational differences were made. Micro-expressions, predator detection, cooperation, coordination, and resource negotiation were directly linked. Modern context in the micro-market sector, this skill has become critical in negotiation, persuasion, and influence. Expressions definitely reveal the other person's intentions, hesitations, and emotions. Body language signals dominance, confidence, or submissiveness. Cues become tools for social manipulation and influence. The hyper-focused observer understands that verbal communication is only the surface. The real influence is in the subconscious layer. Chemical and neural orchestration is also important. Dopamine sal generates rewards when micro-expressions are accurately detected. Norepinephrine heightens alertness. Cortisol controls and sustains vigilance. The subconscious mind continuously analyzes facial expressions and postural shifts. Neural pathways are internally reinforced. Mirror neurons mimic, decode, and hyper-focused observers consciously manipulate these loops acquires a social advantage. Practical scenario: you're in a crowded meeting room. The normal observer only listens to verbal content. Hyper-focused observer, every sound. Cue micro smile. Fleeting eyebrows, posture shifts, and hand gestures are internally mapped. Dopamine release generates rewards when internal interpretation is accurate. Norepinephrine reduces attention. Cortisol maintains vigilance. The subconscious mind generates predictive models. Emotional state, intention, confidence level, underlying motives. You're not an observer, you're a witness to social dynamics. You become the invisible architect. The dark psychology inside is important here too. The person who masters micro-movements is not just an observer. He becomes a behavioral architect and social manipulator. Influence wielding becomes easier by anticipating internal patterns. Observation becomes a weapon, and understanding of micro-behaviors becomes armor. A hyper-focused observer can establish unseen dominance in the social hierarchy. Cinematic visualization, dimly lit room, subtle ambient shadows around a meeting table. Sit down. Facial microexpressions are highlighted. A slight frown, an eyebrow twitch, a shrug. Lip movements trigger dopamine-induced rewards. Norepinephrine amplifies alertness. Cortisol maintains vigilance. Neural circuits continuously mirror neurons execute internal mimicry. The subconscious mind is detecting emotional state, intent, dominance. You're not a passive observer. You're hyper-aware, a social strategist, and a behavioral becoming an architect. Modern reflections on personal growth, social media, digital interactions, remote communication, all this is creating a new landscape, have become limited. But micro-expressions persist even in digital interfaces. Certain typing pauses, emoji usage, timing of response, voice tonality during calls, hyper-focus. The observer activates internal loops, detects, predicts, and models behavioral patterns. Influence refines. Knowledge, observation, and focus all continuously interact. Reinforce internal dominance and external influence by doing so. Practical exercise 1. Mirror practice. Observe your micro-expressions. Detect subtle muscle movements. Emotion. Develop awareness. To video analyze, watch films or interviews and micro-decode the expression. Dopamine release will trigger reward when accurate detection is made. 3. Live interaction drills. Meetings, social gatherings, or negotiations sharpen your observation in situations. Identify positive cues and internal refine the predictive model. Closing reflection. Micro movements only, small they are not gestures, they are fundamental tools of mesosocial power and influence. Validated and modernized in neuroscience, rooted in evolutionary instincts, applicable observational knowledge, and focus continuously in the social landscape, these loops help detect and manipulate signals in the interaction. Activating it consciously establishes unseen dominance. Now the question is what you will be: a passive observer of social micro-patterns or micro-movements, and by acquiring micro-influence, you'll become the ultimate master of your mind and social environment. Your next move is certain. Will do. Temporal awareness. Timing is everything. When temporal awareness, timing is everything, when you go deep into your mind, it becomes clear that awareness is just special and sensory information is absent. Time perception, internal clock and circadian rhythms, all of this is equally critical for cognitive dominance and hyperfocus. The observer understands that every action, every observation, every decision depends on timing. Focusing attention at the right time, detecting a stimulus, or responding to it is the ultimate advantage. This is temporal awareness. Look at it from a scientific perspective. The brain's suprachiasmatic nucleus, SCN, regulates the internal circadian clock. The prefrontal cortex and basal ganglia manage decision-making and action timing. Reticular activating system, RAS, alertness and selective attention synchronizes. Temporal awareness isn't just passive time perception. It provides internal and external event sequencing. Anticipation and predictive focus is integration. A hyper-focused mind consciously activates this system, so that both peak cognitive performance and micro-level observation are optimized. Evolutionary context is critical. Timing life for hunters and predators in the wild and death mattered. Sunrise and sunset sequences provided survival signals. Hunting window, prey activity patterns, environmental changes, sub-attention, reaction and movement requires alignment with the internal clock. It was critical in predator avoidance, resource acquisition, and social coordination. Dopamine release generates rewards when correct actions are executed timely. Norepinephrine amplifies attention. Cortisol sustains vigilance. Neural circuits operated in a continuous internal timing loop. Timing keys in the modern context, productivity and focus have shifted. Social obligations, digital notifications, work schedules, or external distractions have become hyper-focused observers' internal circadian rhythms and attention exploit cycles. Identifies peak focus hours. Critical tasks, creative work, strategic thinking, all in perfect temporal alignment are executed. Dopamine is certainly rewarded when internal timing and external actions align. Neural pathways are internally reinforced. The subconscious mind continuously detects temporal patterns. Chemical orchestration is also significant. Dopamine optimizes reward anticipation. Norepinephrine improves attention. Cortisol sustains controlled vigilance. When temporal awareness is activated, neurotransmitters dynamically adjust. Neural circuits, internal clock and sensory inputs synchronize. Subconscious mind micro events. The hyper-focused observer can consciously leverage this synchronization. It does. Timing is power. Practical example: you are in the room early in the morning. Low sunlight, minimal distractions, dopamine and self-reward generation. When internal rhythms, norepinephrine amplifies alertness. Cortisol vigilance maintains. Neural circuits are in peak focus mode. The subconscious mind is external anticipating cues. Bird song, distant footsteps, environmental micro changes. You are not an observer. You are a temporal strategist in a hyper-aware mind. You've become an architect. Dark psychology insight is also essential here. Temporal with awareness, the observer doesn't just passively track timing. He or she takes predictive action and unseen influences field. Correct observation and intervention, exact moment micro movements, social cues, environmental shifts all are decoded and manipulated under synchronized temporal awareness. Observation becomes weapon. Timing mastery becomes armor. Hyperfocused observer acquires unseen advantage and internal dominion. Cinematic visualization, sunlight slowly filters into a dimly lit room. A clock sits in the background. Environmental cues, shadow shift, distant noise, ambient temperature, internally registered dopamine, norepinephrine, cortisol, chemical symphony, align neural circuits, event decoding, timing. The subconscious mind is generating predictive models. You are not a passive observer. You are a time-optimized, hyper-focused strategist. Temporal awareness is crucial in modern productivity hacks. Pomodo techniques, task batching, peak focus hour scheduling are all alignment tools. The hyper-focused observer consciously maps internal clocks and attention cycles. Task timing, break timing, high cognition activities are all scientifically orchestrated. Observations reinforce temporal optimization in focus continuous interaction. Practical exercises, one morning awareness thrills, certain sunlight cues, observing breathing and internal rhythms. 2. Peak hour task mapping, cognitive peak, identify hours and allocate high-focus tasks. 3. Event anticipation exercise, detect environmental micro changes and at the exact moment response execution. Closing reflection, temporal awareness, passive only, not time perception. It's predictive, strategic and hyper-focused cognition. Evolutionary, both instincts and modern neuroscience validate this. Timing action amplifies observation, knowledge and focus. Reinforce internal dominance in interaction. Hyper-focused observer, temporal awareness consciously exploits the unseen in external and internal reality, establishes dominance. Now the question is, can you use your internal clock and attention? Will you ignore the cycles or acquire temporal awareness and focus on your mind? And will you become the ultimate master of the environment? Your next move will determine that. Memory as a focus tool. Memory is a focus tool. When you delve deep into your mind, it becomes clear. Focus and observation are not limited to the present moment. Memory, working memory, long-term memory, and recall patterns for the hyper-focused observer, it becomes the ultimate tool. Every micro detail, every subtle observation, and every learned insight, the ability to remember, makes your mind both a weapon and a sanctuary. Memory isn't just a way to store information. It's also a function of attention and cognitive function. It's a tool that amplifies control. From a scientific perspective, working memory is primarily a prefrontal cortex. Operates in the cortex, parietal lobes, and hippocampus. Memory encoding and retrieval play a critical role in cognitive load. Cognitive load theory suggests that when working memory, if overloaded, the focus becomes fragment. Hyperfocused observer internal strategies optimize memory capacity using junking, rehearsal, visualization, neural pathways reinforcement and neurotransmitter modulation, dopamine acetylcholine, sustain focus and retention. In evolutionary context, memory was the foundation of survival. Threats to hunters and gatherers in the wild, predators' locations, edible plants and water sources had to be memorized. Every micro pattern, every sound, smell, shadow is internally encoded. Dopamine generates rewards. When correct recall was successful, norepinephrine amplified attention. Cortisol sustains controlled vigilance. This is a key component of memory and attention. Integration can make the difference between life and death. Hyperfocused observer, evolutionary mind, used to exploit environmental cues, social dynamics, and resource patterns, internalized and mapped into predictive models. In the modern context, memory is now critical for learning, multitasking, and retention. Digital overload, constant multitasking, and fragmented attention impair memory circuits. The hyper-focused observer applies internal strategies. Space repetition, visualization, Micro-pattern encoding, knowledge, observation, and focus reinforce memories in continuous loops. Dopamine generates rewards. When recall is correct, neural pathways are internally strengthened. The subconscious mind continuously detects and integrates patterns. Orchestration is also important. Dopamine regulates reward anticipation. Acetylcholine enhances neural plasticity. Norepinephrine amplifies attention. Cortisol sustains vigilance, memory, and a focused mind. Transmitters consciously calibrate. Internal loop encoding, retention, recall continuously optimized. The hyper-focused observer weaponizes memory to amplify focus and observation. Practical example: you are in a dense forest. Sow, cache, leaf, rustle, distant animal sound, shadow shift, internally encoded dopamine sow reward is generated when micro-patterns are correctly recalled. Norepinephrine heightens alertness, cortisol maintains vigilance. Neural circuits form internal predictive maps. The subconscious mind is continuously encoding environmental and social micro-patterns. You're not an observer. You've become a memory-powered strategist and a hyper-focused mind architect. Dark psychology, the inside, is also critical. The person who acquires memorabilia it does not store information. It uses behavioral prediction, social manipulation, and internal exploits memory loops to strategize, identify micro-patterns, solve, and learn. Innate sub-memory loops are encoded and consciously retrievable. Observation becomes weapon. Memory mastery becomes armor. Hyperfocus observer unseen gain advantage in cognitive dominance. Cinematic visualizations, dimly lit study room, minimal external distractions, subtle ambient sounds, clock, distant H internally registered. Dopamine, norepinephrine, acetylcholine, cortisol chemical symphony, aligned neural circuits are mapping, encoding, storing, and recall patterns. Subconscious mind, environmental, social, and internal micro-patterns continuously. You are not a passive observer. You are a memory-aware hyperfocus. Becoming a strategist. Modern reflections on personal growth, knowledge retention, learning efficiency, multitasking optimization. Relying on saved memory loops and attention management, the hyperfocused observer consciously applies memory techniques. Mnemonics, spaced repetition, micro-pattern encoding, internal reflection. The internal loop reinforces memory through knowledge, observation, and focused continuous interaction. Mind weapon and sensory becomes both. Practical exercise, a micro-pattern recall throughout the day, internalize key observations, and consciously recall them in the evening. Association drills organize complex information into smaller, interconnected units. 3 visual memory mappings, visualize environmental micro-cues and social cues internally and practice recall. Do it. Closing reflection memory isn't just a record of the past. It's a focus amplifier. And internal dominion tools. Evolutionary instincts are influenced by modern neuroscience, and cognitive psychology validates this. Observation, knowledge, and focus continuous interactions reinforce memory loops. Hyperfocused observer acquire unseen dominance and predictive advantage by consciously exploiting memory. It does. Now the question is, will you be a passive consumer or a memoirist? And will you become the ultimate master of your mind by acquiring hyperfocused attention? The next move will determine that. The art of single tasking. When you the art of single task mastery, if you go deep into the mind, it becomes clear that real power lies only in knowledge and observation isn't in. The real secret to focus and cognitive efficiency is a single taskstery. The hyperfocused observer knows the difference between monotasking and multitasking. The difference isn't just about surface behavior. It's about neural architecture, attention. It's a matter of allocation and internal energy dynamics. From a scientific perspective, single tasking primarily activates the prefrontal cortex, anterior cingulate cortex, ACC, and reticular cortex. System R is mediated in AS, prefrontal cortex executive function, and regulates decision-making. ACC error detection and conflict monitoring, it helps sustain alertness and selective attention. Multitasking cognitive load fragments. Neural circuits become internally inefficient. Hyperfocused observer monotasking strategies, time blocking, attention funneling, neural efficiency by applying micro-focus loops optimizes. Dopamine release generates rewards. When task completion is achieved and it happens uninterrupted, the evolutionary context is critical. Hunters in the wild for the predator, accurate focus was a matter of life and death. Multiple at a time fragmenting attention across stimuli was dangerous. Predator detection, survival planning, all based on single tasking and focused attention, it was dependent. Dopamine generated rewards when the hunter made a successful strike. Norepinephrine improves attention. Cortisol sustains vigilance through neural pathways internally reinforced where hyperfocused observers' evolutionary mind exploited used every sensory input, every micro-pattern, and every action strategically in the modern context. Multitasking has become a cultural norm. Social media notifications, multiple projects, emails, calls, it all creates internal chaos and cognitive fragmentation. Hyperfocused observer consciously adopts monotasking. Critical tasks, deep work, high cognition activity, sub-destruction-free, time blocked, internally mapped loops are executed. Dopamine triggers self-reward. When uninterrupted task completion occurs, neural pathways are internally reinforced. Subconscious, the mind continuously detects micro-patterns and generates predictive models. Chemical orchestration is also important. Dopamine optimizes reward anticipation. Norepinephrine improves attention. Amplifies cortisol-controlled vigilance. Sustains acetylcholine enhances neural plasticity. Neurotransmitters in monotasking dynamically calibrated. Internal loop avoids distraction and maintains focus. Hyperfocused observer neural efficiency and cognitive dominance consciously maximizes. Practical example, you sit in a shadowless room. Minimize external stimuli. Dumb ambient sound generates dopamine sal reward when internal loop single norepinephrine activates in tasking mode. Cortisol amplifies alertness. The neural circuits that maintain vigilance are continuously processing task-relevant inputs. Predictive modeling is executing policies. External distractions, it's internally filtered. You're not an observer. You're monotasking, hyperfocused. You've become a strategist and cognitive architect. Dark psychology insights are also crucial. Single task story only productivity isn't just a tool. It's also about behavioral influence and internal power leverage. Hyperfocused observer selective among environmental chaos and social distractions becomes an attention wheel, becomes an observation weapon, becomes a focused execution armor. Both neural efficiency and internal dominance are reinforced. Visualization, dimly lit study, mini-sal sunlight pattern, ambient shadows, dopamine, norepinephrine, acetylcholine, cortisol chemical symphony, perfectly aligns its neural circuits. The internally optimized subconscious mind continuously filters out irrelevant inputs. Task-relevant micropatterns detect and execute. You are not a passive observer. You are single-tasking. Become a master and hyper-focused mind architect with modern productivity hacks. Monotasking is critical. Time blocking, attention funneling, micro-focus sessions, digital detox is all tools. Hyper-focused observer consciously internal focus loops activates critical cognitive work uninterrupted and strategically knowledge observation and focus interact in continuous loops. Internal dominion reinforcements, mind weapon and sanctuary both become. Practical exercises, a single task drill, a task, uninterrupted 690 completing with minute focus. 2 digital detoxes, external notifications and social temporarily eliminating distractions. 3 micro-focus loops, attention micro-monitoring cycles and practicing internal self-correction and refocusing. Closing reflection, single task tree is not just a matter of task completion. Cognitive dominance is the foundation of internal efficiency and hyperfocus power. Evolutionary instincts, modern neuroscience, and dark psychology validate it. Observation, knowledge, and focus. Internal dominance in continuous interaction, hyper-focused observer monotasking consciously exploiting unseen advantage and cognitive intelligence achieve. Now the question is, are you fragmented? Will you be a prisoner of multitasking, or will you acquire single-task history and hyper-focused attention? By doing this, you will become the ultimate master of your mind and environment. Your next move will determine subconscious pattern recognition. When you subconscious pattern recognition, if you go deep into your mind, you suddenly realize that most people are just for show. But the subconscious mind and the silent observer are also seeing the reality. The invisible strategist, every SAL pattern, every hidden signal, and every recurring micro-event detects. The hyper-focused observer knows that this is the hidden layer that creates clarity even in external chaos. Subconscious pattern recognition it's not a skill, but the mind's invisible radar and predictive engine. View from perspective. The brain includes the prefrontal cortex, hippocampus, basal, the ganglia, and cerebellum are all involved in complex pattern recognition. The prefrontal cortex regulates high-level prediction and executive function. The hippocampus regulates memory and prior experiences, integrates repeated sequences and motor patterns, manages detection. Cerebellum subtemporal and special cues synchronizes. When these systems align, the subconscious mind continuously generates predictive models. Every micro-signal is internally decoded, and it helps anticipate environmental dynamics. In an evolutionary context, this ability is life-saving. Predator detection and prey tracking in the wild are not just about survival, but also about neural networks. There was also a method of reinforcement. Every rustling leaf, faint shadow, and salt change, it all encoded and processed by the subconscious mind. Dopamine selective reward used to generate micro-patterns when accurately anticipated. Norepinephrine amplifies alertness. Cortisol maintains vigilance. The hyper-focused observer used to exploit the evolutionary mind. Every environment micro-cue and sub-cue social signals in internally mapped and predictive models used to be integrated. In the modern context, subconscious pattern recognition is now critical to decision-making, data analysis, and intuitive insight. Digital overload, fragmented attention, and complex in streams, this subconscious can overwhelm the mind. Hyper-focused observer subconscious pattern detection exploits trends, micro-patterns, correlations, and intuitive. These are internally mapped. Dopamine release generates rewards when predictions are correct. Neural pathways are internally reinforced. Subconscious, the mind continuously analyzes input streams. Observation becomes the weapon. Pattern recognition becomes armor. The dark psychology inside is also critical. One acquires subconscious pattern recognition. He can only perceive reality. He doesn't perceive. He's unseen in behavioral forecasting and social manipulation. Acquires advantage. Micro-patterns, environmental cues, and SAL behavior sequences are encoded in subconscious predictive loops. Unseen dominance by consciously exploiting these loops as a hyper-focused observer establishes. Chemical orchestration is also important. Dopamine reward regulates anticipation. Norepinephrine amplifies attention. Acetylcholine enhances neural plasticity. Cortisol control sustains vigilance. Neural circuits continuous pattern encoding retrieval and predictive mapping hyper-focused observer internal radar continuously. The subconscious mind decodes and integrates every single input. Practical example, you're in stealth mode in a dense forest. Every leaf moves. Distant animal call shadow shift internally registered dopamine subtle reward trigger. This happens when the predictive pattern is accurate. Norepinephrine amplifies attention. Cortisol maintains vigilance. Neural circuits internally decode micro-patterns. The subconscious mind is generating a continuous predictive map. You're no longer a passive observer. You've become a subconsciously driven, hyper-focused strategist and pattern architect. Reflections on personal growth, data streams, social interactions, markets trends, daily life micro-events, safe subconscious patterns continuously in loops are processed. The hyper-focused observer consciously detects trends, recurring cues, hidden signals, intuitive insights, Knowledge, observation, and focused subconscious patterns reinforce recognition in continuous loops. The mind becomes both weapon and sanctuary. Practical exercises in pattern detection, drills, repetitive microprocessors in daily life observe events and create an internal map. To micro-behavior analysis, social detect and anticipate similar behavior sequences in interactions. 3. Data exercise intuition by analyzing small data sets or environmental cues generate predictive insights. Closing reflection. Subconscious pattern recognition, not just observational skills. This cognitive power is predictive advantage and the unseen. Dominance is the foundation of evolutionary instincts, and modern neuroscience, science, and dark psychology validate this. Observational knowledge and focus continuous interaction in subconscious predictive loops reinforce. Hyper-focused observers engage in these loops consciously. Acquires both internal dominion and external influence by exploiting. Now the question is whether you will be an observer of surface-level reality or subconscious reality. Ultimate understanding of your mind and environment by acquiring pattern recognition. Become a strategist. Your next move will be decided. Emotional filtering for focus, the mind's dark mirror. This is what it feels like when you delve deep into your own mind, that external reality is only a half-truth, the most powerful battlefield always. It happens inside you. Self-reflection, inner observation, and the shadow mind are that realm. This is where the hyper-focused observer unlocks their true cognitive power. This dark mirror of the mind isn't just a reflection. It's an internal strategist. And internal, it is a combination of both the critic and the internal teacher. From a scientific perspective, the process primarily involves the prefrontal cortex, anterior cingulate gyrus, ACC, default mode network, TMA, and the hippocampus mediates self-monitoring and regulates executive control. ACC, internal conflict detection and error, manages correction. DMA, self-referential processing and introspection, facilitates hippocampal memory integration and learning experience, plays a critical role in evaluation. Hyper-focused observer in systems consciously activates every thought, emotion, and past experience. Internal radar, introspection in philosophical perspective. No, it's a process of cognitive sharpening. Let go of your internal shadow mind. Observe, recognize your weaknesses, biases, and hidden tendencies. This process gives the hyper-focused observer self-awareness and mental clarity. It also refines external observation and attention loops. The shadow mind, which subconscious patterns suppress desires and hold unnoticed behavioral tendencies, it gets consciously decoded and analyzed. Evolutionary context, also internal evaluation, is crucial for hunters and tribal members to survive in the wild. Tool. Past actions, successful hunts, social interactions, predator encounters, all these were analyzed internally and mapped to internal predictive models. It generated rewards when internal reflection led to behavioral correction. Norepinephrine amplifies attention. Cortisol sustains vigilance. Neural circuits continuously execute internal feedback loops. Hyper-focused observer, the evolutionary mind exploits every internal insight and external advantage, self-reflection and shadow mind analysis, cognitivism and personal critical to growth. Journaling, meditation, deep analysis, and introspection techniques sharpen the internal radar of the hyper-focused observer. Past decisions, emotional response, social interaction, all internally evaluated and predictive patterns are generated. Dopamine release generates rewards when insights are actionable. Neural pathways are internally reinforced. The subconscious mind executes continuous internal mapping and behavioral anticipation. It becomes an observation weapon. It becomes self-reflection armor. Practical example: you're alone in a dimly lit room. Your notebook is open. A candle is flickering past. Actions, emotional reactions, and behavioral loops are internally registered. Dopamine regulates reward. Triggered when internal signals are accurate and alert. Norepinephrine alertness, cortisol maintains vigilance. Neural circuits continue to self-amplify. Observation and predictive modeling are executed, the subconscious mind decoding internal shadow patterns. You are not a passive observer, you are a dark mirror. Become a hyper-focused strategist and cognitive architect. Dark psychology, the inside is critical. The person who masters their shadow mind. Only the self-awareness does not achieve. It is behavioral prediction, internal influence, and the unseen. The unseen advantage can build cognitive dominance. The hyper-focused observer optimizes internal loops by decoding internal weaknesses and hidden tendencies. Both internal dominance and external influence are simultaneously reinforced. Chemical orchestration is also important. Dopamine reward regulates anticipation. Norepinephrine amplifies attention and cortisol vigilance. Sustains serotonin and maintains emotional stability. Acetylcholine neuroplasticity enhances internal reflection when activated neurotransmitters adjust dynamically. Neural circuits are intrinsically predictive. Modeling and behavioral simulations execute continuously. Cinematic visualization, dimly lit room, candle light flickers, notebook pages open, faint ambient sound, surreal shadow movements internally registered, dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, cortisol, acetylcholine chemical symphony, aligned neural circuits, internal loops are continuously executed. Subconscious mind micro-decoding patterns, behavioral tendencies, and hidden insights internally. Not an observer. You've become a shadow mind-empowered hyper-focused strategist. Modern reflections on personal growth, journaling, meditation, self-reflection, introspection, safe cognitive sharpening, and attention loops for reinforcement essential. The hyper-focused observer consciously observes the shadow mind, internally evaluates past actions, emotional triggers, and behavioral tendencies. Internal dominion by interacting in observation and focus continuous loops and predictive advantage reinforces. Mind becomes both weapon and sanctuary. Practical exercises in daily journaling drills, emotional responses of the day, micro-recording decisions and behavior patterns. 2 shadow observation exercises observing and decoding past mistakes, biases, and hidden tendencies. 3 meditatives introspection, silent meditation, self-questioning, thought deconstruction, internal closing reflection for inwardness and cognitive sharpening. Dark mirror of the mind, it's not just a tool for self-reflection. It's a tool for cognitive power, a predictive advantage. And hyperfocus is the ultimate source of dominance. Evolutionary instincts, modern neuroscience, and dark psychology validate this. Observation, knowledge, and focus continuous interaction reinforces shadow mind and internal loops. Hyperfocused observer consciously exploits self-reflection and shadow mind. By doing this, you acquire unseen dominance and internal clarity. Now the question is, will you remain a prisoner of external distractions and internal chaos, or will you master the shadow mind and hyper-focused attention to achieve the ultimate balance between your mind and environment? You will become a strategist. This will determine your next move. The mind's dark mirror mastery of hyperfocus. This is what it feels like when you delve deep into your mind. I believe that this journey is not just about individual skill building, but about the ultimate development of the mind. It is a journey towards integration and internal dominion. In the previous 19 chapters, we have seen attention, observation, sensory, dopamine loops, temporal awareness, memory, single tasking, subconscious pattern recognition, emotional filtering. Shadow mindscape tools and techniques now converge in this final chapter, the ultimate in hyperfocus. From a scientific perspective, brain includes the prefrontal cortex, reticular activating system, RAS, hippocampus, amygdala, anterior cingulate cortex, ACC, and default mode network, DMA. SAB interact dynamically. Prefrontal cortex executive control and decision-making regulates memory. The RAS sustains alertness and selective attention. The hippocampus manages memory encoding and retrieval. The amygdala handles emotional triggers. ACC performs error detection and conflict monitoring. DM facilitates internal reflection and self-awareness. When networks are synchronized so the observer is hyper-focused, predictive, and cognitively becomes dominant, the evolutionary perspective is critical. Hunter in the wild or tribal strategists using multiple cognitive skills for survival and social dominance capabilities had to be integrated. Predator detection, prey tracking, resource allocation, social hierarchy, multi-layer attention and predictive models. Dopamine enhances reward anticipation. Norepinephrine cortisol amplifies attention, sustains vigilance, and keeps neural circuits continuous. Hyperfocused minds used to operate in feedback loops. The same evolutionary advantage brings to the modern cognitive landscape. Psychological synthesis also is essential. The hyperfocused observer doesn't just make external observations. He makes internal loops, emotional regulation, memory, subconscious pattern recognition. Shadow mind integrates knowledge, observation, focus, memory, emotional intelligence continuously interacting. Internal dominion and predictive advantage is established. The dark psychology insight is that the person who achieves integration and external observation can build unseen dominance. Behavioral prediction, social influence, and strategic execution are all possible. Modern lifestyle application is critical. Digital distractions, fragmented attention, multitasking, social overload, and hyperfocus, there are barriers too. The hyperfocused observer consciously applies strategies. Single tasking, temporal awareness, dopamine optimization, emotional filtering, memory loops, subconscious pattern detection, shadow mind reflection, work, learning, creativity, social interactions, all executed in peak cognitive state. Neural pathways are internally reinforced. The subconscious mind continuously updating predictive models. Observation weapon is formed. Internal dominion armor is formed. Practical exercise 1. Integrated focus drill, single tasking, memory, emotional filtering, subconscious pattern detection, practicing simultaneously. 2. Daily reflection loop, shadow mind journaling, integrating meditation insights into next day cognitive strategy planning. 3. Peak performance mapping, temporal awareness, dopamine modulation, attention cycle, map synthetic visualization and optimization to suit daily schedule. Dim light, room shadows, candle light flicker, ambient sound. Neural circuits internally alginate dopamine, norepinephrine, cortisol, acetylcholine chemical symphony, perfectly synchronized subconscious mind micro patterns. Emotional loops, memory sequences, attention cycles all decode and map into predictive models. You're not a passive observer. You're a hyper-focused mind. Become an architect and cognitive master. Modern reflection hyper-focused mind mastery is not just a skill, it's a lifestyle. Work, creativity, relationships, learning is all integrated. Observation, knowledge, and continuous focus. Reinforce internal dominion by interacting in loops. Mind weapon and both become the sanctuary. Evolutionary instincts, scientific validation, and psychological insights all confirm that hyperfocus is the ultimate cognitive edge. Dark psychology insight reinforces that the hyperfocused mind is only an observation tool. No. It is based on behavioral prediction, social influence, cognitive dominance, and the internalist's ultimate weapon. Knowledge, observation, attention, memory, emotional regulation, shadow mind all integrated into predictive power. Hyper-focused observer achieve unseen advantage and ultimate internal control. Closing synesthetic call to action. Now the question is, will you? Will you be a passive observer or acquire a hyper-focused mindset and focus on your internal, and will you become the ultimate strategist of the outer world? If you're committed to this journey, please like my channel. Subscribe and let me know in the comments how you're upgrading your focus. And yes, be sure to click on the hype button below to increase your internal energy and commitment. Amplify. Remember, hyperfocus isn't just a skill. It's a lifestyle, it's a weapon. And there is the path to ultimate internal dominion.